Hi all, and welcome to this month's Tech Talk. We're going to be focusing on cybersecurity audits. It's a very important topic. I am Joe Rafanelli. I'm a director here at Macrosoft. At Macrosoft, we are a powerful combination of business experience and technology expertise, right? And we provide clients with best-in-class solutions and enterprise service projects. So we've been doing that for many, many years. We've got a couple of guys that we've had for a while, Scott and Todd. They have over 25 years of cybersecurity experience. They consistently produce tangible outcomes for numerous clients that make a lot of clients very, very well protected from threats. Gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for joining this month's talk. What I want to say before we get rolling here, this one's going to be like a little different. Typically, I'll do a bunch of warm-up questions. You guys answer them, and then we do chat questions from the audience. We're certainly still going to do the chat questions, but we're going to have a series of slides that Scott's going to help walk us through, and it's going to be specific around the purpose and the process around audits, because these guys have done this a lot of times. So I'm going to go ahead and give Scott the floor at this point. And like I said before, we're going to do chat questions after we see the slideshow. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, everybody. So welcome. Just take a couple of minutes here. So cybersecurity auditing, you know, it's a small word with a lot of big ramifications behind it, right? And it's not only about your, you know, it's not only about your environment, but it's about your people as well. So there's several components, right? There's what I call, you know, portions of audits, right? So there's penetration tests, and everybody's probably heard about those. That anybody that's technical, you know, there's been a lot of talk about penetration testing over the years, and, you know, penetration tests have been performed. And what that is basically taking a look at the outside external facing networks, so such as your firewalls, your routers, your internet service provider, all of that equipment and services as far as websites and application portals. Now those are scans against those particular IT assets to see if they're penetrable, right? So that, you know, can we break in? And some of them are ethical simulated attacks. Others are just scanning and saying, hey, these ports are open. These ports will allow me to get into the data. So that's what a penetration test is. Typically, they've been done externally. More recently, over the last 10 years or so, they've been two-way. And when I say two-way, we'll run a penetration test from the outside of your network, and then we'll come on the inside of your network and try to run the reverse trend out to see what's actually open, and looking for misconfigurations and capabilities of what I call an outbound request for a trusted inbound communication that could bring in a bad guy. And then we do full technical, operational, and organizational assessments. And when I say that, that takes in the penetration testing, but it also goes into further depth where we'll do scanning of the entire network inside, where we'll be also looking at applications, we'll be looking at accounts, we'll be looking at authentication controls, and the like. And then there's regulatory compliance, right? So regulatory compliance is industry specific, right? If you're in healthcare, you know, we all know about HIPAA. So we'll take a HIPAA focus to the entire audit, or a portion of the audit, the assessment piece that we're looking at. We will take a focus on HIPAA. And then, you know, if for those that are going further, you know, in pharmacy, there's a thing called URAC, which is another set of controls and certifications for pharmacists, pharmacies. And then we would also look at high tech and high trust. And those are what I call HIPAA on steroids, where you're actually getting certifications with, but you're put through a whole mill of stringencies to obtain and get that certification. And then we do cybersecurity insurance preparedness. More and more, you know, companies it's a must. You know, it was a nice to have, right, 5, 6, 10 years ago, but with all of the ransomwares and all of the security events, and, you know, some of these major players, these major corporations getting hit daily, it's time for cybersecurity insurance at the, you know, smaller to medium business level as well. You know, you need to be able to protect your asset, not only protect your assets, but if your customers get wind that you've had a ransomware and their data potentially been exposed, or has been exposed, they're not going to be happy. And, you know, there may be there may be litigation or claims towards your organization that they're looking for, from a financial stance. So we do a lot. We get thrown over. Our customers will throw us over cybersecurity insurance questionnaires. We'll help them go through that. The larger ones, sometimes they don't know, and we can't answer those questions definitively. So we'll come in and spend a day and do a quick hit of, I call it a mini audit or a mini assessment, where we'll do some penetration testing. We'll do some conversations with some of the players that can help us get these questions for cybersecurity answered. And then also it'll give you a work list. So we'll come in, and if you answer no to something that must be answered yes before they'll write you a policy, we can help you identify those issues and set a remediation list to get those cleaned up so that you can get the policy in force. We do a lot of proactive protection, look at proactive protection within the environment, what type of antivirus, and now it goes beyond that. It goes into managed detection and response for endpoints. Are your firewall controls proper? Are you being proactive as far as monitoring events and alerting those in IT that may need to be alerted as to a potential situation, and the like? And then we do post-event review, right, where we may come in and do, whether it's a penetration test, a full assessment, or a full audit. We'll hand you a series of reports, and we'll get into that here shortly. Whereas you'll have remediation work lists and the like, and you may want us to come back and say, okay, we'll validate that you did get the work done, or that these negative factors have now become a positive flow. And then we'll, help you with your forensics remediation as well, and build any cases that may be necessary in a ransomware event. Or we'll do, we can do simulated forensics where we find it before the bad guys do. So moving into the next slide, talk a little bit about audit focus, right? So where we focus from a technical or technology standpoint, we look at your hardware network infrastructure. We look at your router, which is the head of your network. We look at your firewall, which is the traffic cop, in and out of the network. We look at all of your switches internally, and then we look at your wireless access points, within the facilities. We also look at how your network is designed. Is it structured right? Is the router set up right and passing traffic right to the firewall? So we look at a lot of the configuration of that router, firewall, switches, the wireless access points. Not only are we scanning against, whether or not ports are available, but we're also looking at the configuration of those assets. And then we're looking at the segmentation. Is finance segregated properly from the general population as far as the ability to even get through the network to, say, your financial applications, your accounting applications. So we look at how your IP addressing and structuring is done, as well as your network segmentation for organizational units, different various locations, and the like. We also look at all of your servers and workstations and mobile devices that may be on site, but not only on site. A lot of folks are going to the cloud, or they're doing a hybrid model or a co-location to another data center that's not in their physical corporate environment. We still have the ability to look at those assets as well. So we'll look at all of, the control of all of your servers, workstations, mobile devices. We'll scan them for, typical known vulnerabilities for Microsoft or Macintosh, iOS. We'll look for those, scan for those vulnerabilities on the operating systems, but we'll also look at the applications, what applications are installed. And do those applications have vulnerabilities? Let's just pick an easy one. We have Firefox, which a lot of folks use. You might be a Firefox 11, but Firefox 11 had a lot of vulnerabilities, and there's a patch to 11.5. You haven't applied that yet on certain assets. We'll be able to definitively define that for you and pass you a list so that you can do that remediation. We also look at patch management for the operating systems and the applications. We also look at systems, right? So, that's servers, but, workstations as well. Are your folks, when they go to lunch, is their workstation timing out so another individual can't sit down at their workstation and access the network, right? So we'll look at system timeout controls from the physical assets, but we'll also look at them from, let's say, a remote worker that's coming back in. Are they timing out? Is their workstation at home timing out? Is there a control that cuts them off to make them revalidate back into the network at some certain set period of time? and cut their access so that it's not constantly running live. We'll look at accounts and accessibility, right? So we'll do scans against the accounts and see if there's, an overusage of an administrative function, or if accounts have too many rights that they shouldn't. We'll look at how your role-based and groups are set up. We'll do that both as a scan and a physical review. And then we'll look at your endpoint protection, right? It goes beyond antivirus these days. And so you may have an older antivirus solution that's up to date and running and doing well for you. But there are new solutions that are at a nominal cost increase and sometimes at the same cost, and we'll be able to help you identify and suggest some of those that might do some managed detection and response, where rather than just saying you've got a virus, they're looking at the pattern of the communication, whether it's on a website or they're looking at potentially a file that doesn't look right. And do a little more as far as quarantining and stopping that bad point of entry for malicious malware coming in. We'll look at your cybersecurity hardware and software. We'll look at whether or not you have some sort of an intrusion detection type of system, or mail, like a Barracuda mail gateway in front of your network, and how we'll look at, number one, if it's there, and number two, if it's there, how is it set up? Is it set up properly? And we'll challenge it a little bit to make sure that it's actually doing the job that it's intended to do. And that's at the gateway. And also we'll look at whether or not you're doing any monitoring and automated protection of the environment. If something happens, are your MDR or gateway messages going to the proper people? Is there auto quarantine for malware that can take you down in a hurry? So we'll look at those configuration items as well. We'll look at whether or not, a lot of the compliances, HIPAA, requires that you have encryption at the desktop and encryption at rest. And there's a lot of encryption statutes around, within HIPAA. So we'll look at whether or not, your assets are encrypted, and whether you're using encryption software or some of the best industry practice services. And then we'll look at whether or not you have a security operations center, and small and medium businesses, most don't. But there are some in-house controls that are very cost effective, that possibly could be rolled out, and we can kind of help you identify those and talk those through with you after an audit. And then there's also third parties that offer these services at a fairly cost effective mechanism. So we can kind of talk about that, as your business grows. Then we look at the authentication processes, right? Your account controls. Is there an overusage of administrator? Is there, are there users that have left the environment that haven't logged in for 30 days? We'll make sure that the role structuring is correct, such that there's nobody in the accounting group or access to accounting assets that don't belong in there. And then we'll just look at your overall organizational group structuring and make sure, talk with you and make sure that it fits your specific environmental needs. Some like to do it by organization, by department. Others have other ways of doing it. We'll kind of help you look at that structure and see if we can't help you make that streamlined and work for you, in an optimal manner. We'll look at your password structuring and whether or not you're using multi-factor authentication or single sign-on. If you're not, we'll help you find ways to get that done. If you are using them, we'll look at your password controls and make sure that they're meeting best industry practices for numbers of characters and complexity. Then we do organizational and operational tasks within the audit. We look at your policies, written policies and procedures. Do you have a full set of IT security policies? Do you have incident and disaster recovery plans in place? Are they tested? Do they work? If you don't have these in place, we also have services where we actually have templates that we could possibly help tailor to your environment fairly quickly and get those in place for you. Do you have dedicated staff resources for cybersecurity management? Smaller and medium-sized businesses, people are flipping hats, right? And a lot of times, you may have the IT server administrator may also be watching security on the servers as well. And so we kind of look at, are you utilizing your IT staff resources correctly? Do you need IT staff resources, or can we do this with some sort of an automated tool? So we'll kind of help you look at your cybersecurity management strategy and your governance, and make sure that you have the proper mechanisms and control that fit your environment. And then, people pass this, but we're seeing more and more of this, and we're actually helping a lot of our clients now. They're saying, well, gosh, Susie let in a virus, or Susie, got malware in her system. And Susie did that because she didn't know that it was a bad place to click or a bad document to open. So more and more companies are going for formal end user training. Some of them are taking it under the guise in house and having IT do something. Others are getting very cost effective third party services out there that will help them automate the process and send not only train them, but it'll send tests out there to see what their knowledge is before that. So it'll send them potential simulated malware, and it'll see which users click on that, and not to get the users in trouble, but to see where we can improve security by setting in the right training and getting those folks that may not understand something a way to understand it and not make an effect on the environment. And again, back to regulatory compliance statutes, it's back to the industry, right? The financial companies are going to be looking at PCI, and companies that take a lot of credit card transactions. Manufacturing looks more at ISO controls, and then of course HIPAA and high trust, for healthcare. So we pretty much can help you through the gamut of the major regulatory compliance statutes out there. And the fines are pretty stiff. The ramifications and the penalties are pretty gripping. And so having our expertise to help you may help you avoid a bad situation. So then going into the next slide. Audit tasks. So automated, we do the scanning, we do in our pen test, it's pretty much all automated, all scans, full vulnerability assessments. We also run scanners that go beyond, ports and protocols, and we go into applications and we enumerate them. We help you build an asset list of your applications. We know get you to know the versions, any known vulnerabilities. We'll look at your websites, any of your application portals that may be customer facing or used internally. We'll look at the OWASP top 10 controls, which is standard governing safe use of websites, web applications, and portals. We'll look at your accounts. We'll look at your network, your Active Directory, your applications. Maybe you may be having a PDF service where you have multiple folks in a higher end of a PDF product. We'll look at those controls and see whether or not the right people are in it, whether or not they've got the right accesses. And then we'll look at weak credentials and let you know where credentials may be bad. I can brute force or can figure out somebody's password. So we'll do some scanning and some testing against that as well. One nice thing in that area, some of the trainings applications that are third party out there now will actually help you do some of that in some of the tests that they run and simulations that they run. They'll also actually do that as part of their offering. We'll look at technical vulnerabilities within the environment. Is your firewall and your configurations, are your server, DNS, your naming conventions, are things configured properly in the environment? Do you have application interfaces that tie, say, your financial system to, say, your manufacturing system? Are those used correctly? Are they going the proper direction? Do they have vulnerabilities that could be, the man in the middle attack? We'll look at your patch management, and then we'll look at your runtime of applications and identify, are there injectionable threats out there? And again, back to, we mentioned it on the last slide, the compliance specific vulnerabilities, HIPAA, high trust, PCI, ISO will help you, hone in and focus. Our audits and assessments are honed in and focused, fit to your environmental needs. And then, we'll look at, do you have, we'll do some automated network IP design mapping. We'll run some scans to see, help you map out your network a little bit and take a look at what that structure looks like. Then we do physical reviews. We'll review your formal policies and procedures. Do they work? Do they work for your environment? We'll have interviews with your folks if necessary. Try to help you, make sure that works. We'll look at your cybersecurity tools, what you have versus what might be out there as open source or, fairly reasonable cost for you. We'll look at, are they managing your configs and what tools you may be using. We'll kind of help you with your IP structuring. We'll look at that, do a physical review of your IP structuring and your network segmentation. kind of in combination with some of those scans. And then again, we'll look at your access controls and we'll do a physical review of, say, your Active Directory builds and the roles, and whether or not your role-based organization makes sense, or if it's too convoluted and maybe could be streamlined and better for your business. And then, we'll look at the access controls to your physical location. Is your data center locked? Do you have biometrics in place? Do you have scan cards to get into the building? We can look at all of those types of controls. And then again, do you have a good asset management set of controls in place? And a lot of times what we found is they'll have some sort of a spreadsheet or asset management that's sufficient, but it's not optimal, right? And once we kind of do our assessments, they find that we can help them automate asset management such that it's not this manual process anymore, and it's more flowing. And asset management is a critical component of cybersecurity, because if you don't identify the assets on your network, there may be rogue assets out there that the bad guys can do some bad act on your environment. And then so going over to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what is post-audit. So post-audit, we'll be providing an executive summary report. It's 4 or 5 pages typically that'll just explain, what we did, our approach, the scope of the audit, what we did, who we talked to, what our findings were. They'll all be summarized in a nice, neat executive summary report. And then we'll create a series of remediation reports, and that'll be work lists for the IT department to be able to kind of look at what we found, and that'll be accompanied with supporting documents and URLs to best practice CVEs. So it'll be, hey, we found open port can be closed this way. Here's an article on how to do that. Then we'll send copies. We'll provide copies of all of anything we scan. We provide copies of all of those reports in a nice structured folder structure so that they are notated within our remediation work lists, and they kind of coincide and collaborate with each other. And then we help you through remediation planning by criticality. All of our remediation reports will show critical, high, low. We'll base it on criticality, and we can help you do the remediation planning as well. And then, of course, we can help doing the remediation assistance, right? We were just in there. We found these things. A lot of times we can clean up and handle these things. Some of them on site, some of them just immediately post-audit very quickly. It's a way to cost effectively get these done rather than putting them into a do-it-later project plan, or that may fall to the wayside by some other priority. So we help you with the project planning, and then after that, we can come in and do some post-remediation rescans. Whether we help you through the remediation, you do it yourself, we'll do some rescans and reviews and say, we found it, it's gone.
Great going there, Scott. Thanks for putting all that together and putting all your thoughts down on those slides. It definitely helps. Going through audits is very cumbersome, and you guys make that easier for potential clients. So thank you for that. All right, so I already got some chat questions coming through, but I'll just read them off here. What are the key components or areas that a typical cybersecurity audit should cover?
I'll go ahead and take that. Let Scott take a breather there and catch his breath after the presentation there. Scott covered a lot of these in his presentation, but just to reiterate here, the big start of the audit is always going to happen with your technical assets. So that's going to cover your hardware, networking components, firewalls, switches, servers, workstations, mobile devices, IoT devices, PLC controllers for manufacturers, things of that nature. And then we're going to couple that with the software that sits on top of all of those assets. So whether that's the OS that's running on your Cisco switches or your Fortinet firewalls or your Microsoft operating system or Apple, we're going to look at all of that software that's sitting on top of those assets, specifically the OS, and then any application that's installed on top of that. The other thing that we got to make sure we're doing is looking at any third-party vendors and hosted environments that you're using. So just because you're signing up for AWS or Microsoft Azure or any of those hosting services, it doesn't mean that that environment is secure and configured correctly out of the gate for you. Most of those places leave that up to you. That's where we find a lot of our shortfalls when doing a lot of our audits. There's a lot of people just assuming that third-party services are secure and ready to go. So we want to take a look at that as much as we can. During those looks at all those environments, we're looking for your vulnerabilities and your attack surfaces. Where can somebody get in, whether that's physical, virtual, hosted sites, and just trying to minimize all those vulnerabilities and attack surface areas. That's the goal of the cybersecurity in general, is to limit vulnerabilities and decrease that attack surface as much as possible. We'll go through all of your access controls for physical sites, hardware, software, all of your data sets. If you've got PII, personal identifiable information, PHI, your health information on patients or customers, or if you're doing sales, you've got a lot of PCI and sale data on people, whether that's credit cards or billing address, things of that nature. So we're going to look over all of that as well. Next big step that we're doing is to look at your plans that you have in place. Do you have an incident response plan? Follow that up by, if you do have an incident and it causes a disaster, do you have a disaster recovery plan? Is it been implemented? Has testing been done on those? Is the organization ready? Are all the key people know where all that information is at and how to get to it? And that's critical for your operational and organizational readiness. A lot of this looks at the technical side of things, but your organization needs to be ready as well. So that organization needs to have those IR and DR plans in place. They need to do testing of them to make sure everybody's comfortable with them and knows what to do. And then just, having all that staff ready and in place and knowing their assignments and who to contact and when to contact them. So, that's another key thing that we go over in these audits, is to make sure that you're doing those testing and have those type of roundtable discussions.
Yeah, Todd makes some great points there. And, something that struck me as he kind of guided us through that, there is no one size fit all audit or assessment or pen test, right? It's to your environment. And, as Todd mentioned, you may be doing an AWS configuration, and, the word audit seems to scare people. We're not coming in like the IRS here. We're coming in as an extension of your IT department, not to, do a pass. This isn't a pass fail that we're going to run to the CIO and say, hey, you guys aren't doing their job. No, this is where you guys could use some help. It's always this overworked situation, right? A lot of times. So, you do an AWS configuration, you may be new to it, or you've spent a lot of hours on this, right? And there's been a lot of coffee or Cokes or Pepsis, a lot of caffeine has been put into this configuration. At the end of the day, we can come in as an extended arm of your service or as your IT department and say, hey, did you think of and did you look at? So this isn't a pass fail, or, we're not coming in with a litmus test here. We're coming in to be an extension of your organization to help you think of things you may already know, may not have thought of, mistakes you may have made because, everybody's flipping hats and multitasking. So, the key word in that question, I love the question, was components, right? So those components are the ones that fit your environment.
Yeah. You can tell the passion with you guys. So I don't know how any average company would do an audit for themselves. You guys got so much knowledge between those ears. It's second to none. You know what I mean? You guys know what you're doing here. Okay, let's look at the next question. How can small businesses with limited resources prepare for a cybersecurity audit effectively?
I'll start out on that one as well.
Okay.
So one of the big things, the easiest place to start is just collect all the data that you have. So, that small business can go through and collect any current policies or procedures and documentation they have. Some small businesses might not have any of that. Others might have, a lot of that done. And so getting all of that together, going over the documentation that you have, making sure that documentation is up to date. And you want to collect that documentation for anything cybersecurity related, which could go from anything network, hardware, software that I just covered in that, last question. And then, any documentation for any third party hosting service you're using. If you're outsourcing payroll, have that documented, who that's outsourced to, who the point of contacts are, who has management over that service, all of those type of things. So having all of that documentation and procedures and everything collected really gives you a step up to get ready for an assessment or an audit. And a lot of times just during this collection process, as you're going through and saying, hey, do we have this documentation? Do we have that? Do we have our firewall configuration backed up? Do we have a document that tells me how everything on my network works, or the flow of it? As you're going through trying to get that documentation, you might discover shortfallings on your own before somebody even comes in to do an audit. You might say, well, why don't we have this, and get that put together before the audit comes in. So once you have all of that documentation, and you're reaching out to an audit team like us, and you're ready for that sit down, when you can hand that information and go over that with your audit team, or even just, preliminary audit, if our team takes a look at what you've got or what you don't have, a lot of times we'll say, hey, you're not ready for a full-on audit. You need an assessment done to see where you're lacking, the programs you have, the programs you don't, and get that stuff built out, and help you get it built out, and then have that validated by a third party. So sometimes we come in because somebody says they want an audit, and we find out that they're not ready for it, and we help them put their procedures and policies and everything in place, and get them ready for an audit, and then have somebody else come in and do the audit on all the work that we implemented. So it's it goes in various different levels there, and so you don't have to always start with the highest, most complicated, full-on audit. You can take that in steps and do, different types of assessments, whether that's a cybersecurity assessment, a vulnerability assessment. There's a lot of different things that we can do ahead of a full audit.
Yeah, we can come in and do, back to Todd's point, there's that, it kind of ties to that component question, right? So we can also come in and give a 1 hour meeting and do a little bit of a discovery, right? So we'll throw kind of a list of the generic ideas of what, you may want to do, and collect to come to the meeting. And then we do a 1 hour discussion, and you may say, gosh, I have none of this. Then we can kind of say, well, like, as Todd said, we could kind of do a pre-assessment and come in and just get you that in place and help you prepare for, farther and more down the road. So, sometimes it's just doing this through attrition and baby steps, and we can help you baby step this in, and have a 1 hour conversation, say, do you have, and that generates a list on top of the list that we can throw you going into that discussion.
Well said, gentlemen. Well said. I see another question here. What are the most common challenges organizations face during a cybersecurity audit, and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, I can take that one. The common challenges, I think Todd give him a breather there. Todd did a great job, kind of outlining all of the components, and then how small businesses, what small businesses can do, and how we make this a component. I think I said it a little earlier, but one of the biggest challenges is the employees of the organization doing pushback, feeling threatened that we might uncover or find something that could be determined as they're doing something wrong, and there's nothing further from the truth, right? So getting in there and making sure as you're coming in and saying, saying here's Microsoft, they're going to help us do a cybersecurity audit, cybersecurity assessment of the environment. They're doing this. This isn't a pass-fail. This isn't a government litmus test. This is them helping us find vulnerabilities and teaching us or helping us fix those. That's one of the biggest challenges. And then, to that last question again, just that question in and of itself, what do I do to get ready for this? This is a challenge, and a lot of those documents and things that Todd spoke to may not exist. And they may say, well, I'm embarrassed. I don't have any of this. Then maybe that's where we do come in and help you build that. So it's the starting point. The starting point is taking away the negative factors of it. We're not the bad guys. We're here to help. We're not here to, put somebody into the penalty box. And then, if you're not ready, there's no harm in following that. That's a good thing for us to know. So the challenge is being prepared for that first conversation to make sure, what do you have?
Okay, awesome. I love the partnership aspect of when you guys speak. You said it a couple times. It's not pointing fingers. It's we want to partner and get you guys safe. Okay, so I have another question here. What tools of frameworks, it says ISO 27001, are commonly used during cybersecurity audit?
Yeah, the frameworks are more based on the industry that your business is in, right? It's on your environment, right? So NIST is kind of the overarching guideline for most all of the regulatory compliance statutes, right? So HIPAA takes in NIST, ISO takes in NIST. I mean, NIST are just kind of the common sense, long listed guidelines that most all compliances borrow from, leverage, utilize, right? ISO would be more for, maybe manufacturing or, more just direct common sense kind of policies. HIPAA back to healthcare, PCI back to those who do a lot of credit transactions, SOX for, financial. And so the methodologies and the frameworks kind of depend on the environment and the nature of the business's industry.
All right, very good. Lots of detail there. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. All right, so let's close it out. All right, thanks everybody for your questions. Million thanks to Scott and Todd walking us through the audit process and all those detailed answers to those questions. Audience, if you have any other questions or comments, please reach out to us. As you can probably tell, we want everybody to have cybersecurity. We want everybody to be secure, right? Small businesses for sure. We like to say we're cybersecurity for less, because we want everybody to be secure with their cybersecurity. You see my contact information there. Hopefully everybody enjoyed what all the details that we went through for audits. There's a lot of information there. Maybe folks can just sort of replay what we just recorded. And for now, I want to thank everybody once again, and we'll talk again next month. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Bye-bye now.